This past week, two of my friends have been in British Columbia getting trained to be facilitators of a spiritual practice known as forest bathing. Now, I actually have a 3-year degree, a diploma in the art of spiritual direction. I'm pretty familiar with spiritual practices and had never heard of that one previously. Any forest bathing aficionados out there? All right, I see a hand or two. All right. One of them, before leaving, posted an image on social media of the required reading. The first was The Hidden Life of Trees. Anyone read Hidden Life of Trees? All right, so that was the one that initially inspired the sermon I'm about to share. So I was like, all right, I know that one. The second one was titled Forest Bathing by Dr. Qing Li, who's the chairman of the Japanese Society for Forest Medicine. Now, I hadn't heard of that, but as a Unitarian Universalist, I believe in salvation by bibliography. So I was like, all right, well, I better read that. I want to share with you an excerpt for our reading this morning. He writes, in Japan, we have a practice called forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku. Shinrin in Japanese means forest, and yoku means bath. So Shinrin-yoku means bathing in a forest atmosphere, or taking in the forest through our senses. He recommends, if you have it, taking about 2 hours for a forest bath and going about 1.5 miles during that 2 hours, so walking quite slowly. But you can also do this just on the way back to your cars this afternoon, right? You can do a little mini forest dip. Make sure, he writes, if you want to do a true 2-hour, 1.5-mile forest bath, that you leave your phone and camera behind. He says you're going to be walking aimlessly, slowly, not trying to commodify your experience for other people's social media pleasure. He says, let your body be your guide. Listen to where your body wants to take you, and take your time. It doesn't matter if you don't get anywhere. You're not going anywhere. You all know that saying, wherever you go, there you are, right? You're just savoring the sounds and smells and sights of the forests and letting the forest in. Listen to the birds singing, the breeze rousing the leaves of the trees. Look at the different leaves, the sunlight filtering through the branches. Smell the fragrance of the forest and breathe in that natural aromatherapy. Taste the freshness of the air as you take in deep breaths, in and out. Place your hands on the trunk of a tree. Dip your fingers or toes in a stream. Lie on the ground. As you drink in the forest, may joy and calm arise.
Bend, little willow, wind's gonna blow you hard and cold tonight. Life as it happens, nobody warns you, willow, hold on tight. Nothing's gonna shake your love, take your love away. No one's out to break your heart, it only seems that way. Sleep, little willow, peace gonna follow, time will heal your wounds. Grow to the heaven seasons, now and forever, always came too soon. Nothing's gonna shake your love, take your love away. No one's out to break your heart, it only seems that way. Nothing's gonna shake your love, take your love away. No one's out to break your heart, it only seems that way. Bend, little willow, wind's gonna blow you hard and cold tonight. Life as it happens, nobody warns you, willow, hold on tight. Little willow.
As I've been learning about the hidden life of trees, I've also been paying more attention to how much trees have meant to various people over time. And most recently, I was watching Springsteen on Broadway. It's recorded on Netflix. I did get to see it on Broadway. If any of you did, good for you. Have any of you seen it on Netflix or on Broadway? Good, I see a few hands. All right. And I was not surprised that as the boss waxed nostalgically about his life, one vignette prominently featured a tree. Remembering his childhood home, he recalled that in our front yard, only a few feet from our porch, stood the grandest tree in town. It was a towering, beautiful copper beech tree. And on sunny days, I lived under its branches. Its roots were forts for my soldiers and a corral for my horses. And I was the first on my block to climb high into its upper reaches, leaving behind a world that I already didn't care for much already. Up at the top, I had the wind in my face and all the dreaming room you could want. On slow summer nights, I'd sit beneath its arms with my pals like the cavalry at dusk, listening and listening for the evening bells of the ice cream man and my grandmother's voice calling me to bed. Now, the tree in the slide is not from the boss's childhood home, but it is a majestic copper beechwood tree. Along those lines, let your mind drift back. In your mind's eye, can you picture trees that have been significant for you in your life? Can you remember what they looked like in different seasons of the year? Can you perhaps even remember the feel of a particular tree's bark against your hand, or the smell of its leaves or flowers in the spring? I can so easily recall the dogwood tree from one in the front yard of one of my childhood homes, the magnolia tree at my maternal grandmother's house, the pecan trees in my paternal grandfather's yard, the towering oak at the elementary school that I attended, from whose branches hung curls of Spanish moss. But you don't have to grow up with a tree for it to become a beloved friend. Although I've only been a resident of downtown Frederick for about 3 years, I was devastated, along with many others, almost a year ago when I learned that the large, iconic weeping willow tree near the Baker Park bell tower, some of you may have seen it, had fallen during a storm. And it felt right that quickly citizens called out to hold a vigil for it and even a funeral for this tree that had meant so much to so many people for almost 60 years. That's generations that came and went under that tree. Does mourning a tree seem strange? Well, the more I learn about trees, the more appropriate such responses seem. And as significant as an individual tree can be, the larger mysteries of trees are actually in the plural. The magic not only of a tree, but of forests, especially when trees are given time and space to grow naturally over immense spans of time together. And I can again readily bring to mind beloved forests, as perhaps can you, from the acres of woods behind one of my childhood homes in South Carolina to the forests surrounding my childhood summer camp in Black Mountain, North Carolina, to the holy majesty of Muir Woods with its old growth redwoods, which I visited often while completing my doctoral work in the Bay Area. The love of trees that I'm espousing feels at home in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. After all, one of our most influential forebears from the Unitarian half of our heritage is Henry David Thoreau, whose love of trees and forests was legendary. Notice the subtitle of his most famous book. We know it is Walden often, but it's actually Walden or Life in the Woods. There was a sense as well in which Thoreau's choice to remain rooted in his hometown of Concord, Massachusetts, emulated the stability, the depth, the richness that can develop from a tree's own rootedness to one particular spot, to spend a long time in one good place. As Richard Higgins has detailed in his book, Thoreau and the Language of Trees, Thoreau wrote prolifically about trees for almost a quarter century, from 1836 to 1861, just before his death. He observed them closely, he knew them well, he described them in detail. He saw them as his friends, even, he said, his, quote, distant relations. He once wrote, "What cousin of mine is the shrub oak?" I invite you to hear just a few excerpts from Thoreau's extensive writing about trees and notice if his observations resonate with some aspects that you have noticed about trees through the seasons, through the years. Observing a hemlock in winter, he wrote, "What singular regularity in the outline of trees." Or during the spring, how bright, how full of freshness and tender promise and fragrance is the new world. It is remarkable that many beech and chestnut oak leaves, which have recently expanded, have already attained their full size, how they lurch themselves forward into the light, how suddenly nature spreads her umbrellas. Or in summer, those fugacious universal fragrances of the meadows and woods. What a glorious crimson fire as you look into the sunlight through the thin edges of the scales of a black spruce's cones, so intensely glowing in their cool green beds. Thoreau also wrote movingly of how studying trees in the autumn can teach us how to die well if we're paying attention. He said, how poetically, how like saints or innocent or beneficent beings do trees give up the ghost. There's so much more to say about Thoreau and trees, but I'll limit myself to sharing with you my favorite anecdote of his fierce commitment to forests. When Harvard College appointed a new professor of natural history, Thoreau said, "It made no sense to hire someone to lecture on oaks while the best specimens of the trees were being cut for lumber all over Massachusetts." He said, "It's like teaching children Latin and Greek while burning the books printed in those languages." And for those of you who have or will watch Springsteen on Broadway, there's a similarly poignant bookend near the end of the show in which he returns to his hometown as an adult to discover that that beloved copper beechwood tree, which had been there many years before his birth, which he expected to be there many years after his death, had been cut down. It was only a stump. To delve more deeply into the mysteries of trees, which have meant, again, so much to so many, let us turn now from the 19th century forests of Concord and the 20th century suburbs of New Jersey to today. The person who has taught me the most about trees in recent years is the ecologist Peter Wohlhaben. In 2016, he published the incredible book, The Hidden Life of Trees, which is one of those books that can shift forever how you experience the world. One of the first keys to learning more about the hidden life of trees is to keep in mind that compared to us humans, trees are pretty slow. We used to say in my spiritual direction program, we're going to start slowly so that later we can slow down. But there's a good reason why trees are slow. One of the oldest trees on earth is a spruce in Sweden that has been estimated to be more than 9,500 years old. With such a luxury of time on their hands, trees can afford to take things at a leisurely pace. The electrical impulses that pass through the roots of trees, for example, move at the rate of 1/3 of an inch per second. Here's another photo of that same 9,500-year-old spruce tree. The relatively slow pace of trees can lead us to misperceive them as more inanimate than is actually the case. It turns out that trees use those ultra-slow electrical impulses as one of their many methods of communication, which also includes smell and taste. For example, if a giraffe starts eating the leaves of an African acacia tree, the tree releases a chemical into the air that signals to other trees that a threat is at hand. As that chemical drifts through the air and reaches other trees, they smell it and are warned of danger. And even before that giraffe reaches them, they begin producing toxic chemicals. Insect pests are dealt with slightly differently. The saliva of leaf-eating insects can be tasted by the leaf being eaten. And in response, the tree again sends out a chemical signal that attracts predators that feed on that leaf-eating insect. Trees may move slowly, but if you stop to pay attention, they've got a lot going on. More astonishing still is that the relationship between trees that grow naturally together in the wild is intricate, even intimate. Wohlhaben calls it the Internet of Trees, or the Wood Wide Web. Trees have evolved to take care of one another, sometimes even going so far as to nourish the stump of a tree felled centuries ago by feeding it sugars and other nutrients. You have these trees that are dead for centuries, but their stump is actually still alive because it's been fed through its roots. But only some stumps are thus nourished. Scientists speculate those they may be the parents of the trees that make up the forest around it. We're going to watch a short video. It's a little under 3 minutes to show you a little more. Take in a breath or two as we work out the technology. And thank you, Tech Deck up there.
Bäume sind sehr soziale Wesen und da kümmern sich tatsächlich die Eltern, die...
There's subtitles for the German in a second. German speakers out there? Anybody? All right. You get a little test this morning, pop quiz. If this doesn't work, we will move on with our lives.
Mutterbäume ihren Nachwuchs. Hier haben wir einen Buchenkindergarten.
I started looking at the root systems, and I found that the roots of these different species, when they grew together, they were all intertwined and interlinked together.
The Lucianos people in Vancouver Island.
Can we go back to the beginning? Just back 20 seconds. There we go. All right. Thank you all so much.
Bäume sind sehr soziale Wesen und da kümmern sich tatsächlich die Eltern, die Mutterbäume, ihren Nachwuchs. Hier haben wir einen Buchenkindergarten.
I started looking at the root systems, and I found that the roots of these different species, when they grew together, they were all intertwined and interlinked together.
The Luchanos people on Vancouver Island, they say hish ish tsawalk, which means everything is one.
Was wir als Baum betrachten, das ist nur oberirdisch. Ein Großteil des Lebens findet aber unterirdisch statt. Also auf einem Teelöffel gehen mehrere Kilometer Pilzfäden, die hier dicht verwoben das Internet des Waldes bilden.
The mycorrhizal network is just below the surface of the forest floors. All of the trees were all linked together in a single massive network. That was sort of the rudimentary understanding of the language of trees.
Bäume haben Gefühle, die können Schmerz empfinden, aber die haben auch solche Emotionen, kann man fast sagen, wie Angst. Es gibt bei Bäumen auch besondere Freundschaft, dass Bäume sich ja, wie so ein altes Ehepaar zusammentun und dann ganz besonders Rücksicht aufeinander nehmen.
We think of that as an interaction between trees, but it's really, you know, they're looking after each other.
Also hier kämpft nicht jeder gegen jeden ums Licht, ganz im Gegenteil, hier unterstützt jeder jeden. Also ein Baum, der von Insekten befallen wird, der warnt alle anderen vor in seinem Umfeld.
Through these various experiments and our discoveries, I've started to think about the root systems of trees and forests as the brains of the forest.
Hier ist ein uralter Stumpf und dieser Stumpf, der lebt noch.
The stump is still alive because its root systems are actually grafted to its neighbors.
Von Natur aus kuscheln Bäume gerne, stehen möglichst eng zusammen und lieben die Gemeinschaft und die lieben auch die Langsamkeit.
You know, trees don't do well when they're by themselves. You know, we as humans are part of that forest, and what we're perceiving is really valuable, and we should be paying attention to that.
It demonstrates those relationships that we've known and understood for a long time.
Really, they are caring for each other. They're making sure that they're a productive, healthy, vibrant, diverse community of trees, families of trees.
Share with you a little more about some of the discoveries currently being made about trees. Wohlleben writes that roots are the most important part of a tree. Conceivably, as that video gestured to, this is where the tree equivalent of a brain is located. Brain, you ask? Isn't that a bit far-fetched? Possibly, but we know that trees can learn. This means they must store experiences somewhere. And therefore, there must be some kind of storage mechanism within the organism. Just where it is, no one knows, but the roots are the part of the tree best suited to the task. Specifically, researchers at the University of Bonn have measured electrical signals that led to changes in behavior after they were processed in a transition zone. If the root encounters toxic substances, impenetrable stones, or saturated soil, it analyzes the situation and transmits the necessary adjustments to the growing tip. The root then changes direction as a result of this communication and steers the growing root around critical areas. But it gets more fascinating still. The Australian scientist, Dr. Monica Gangliano, has published research about mimosas. Now, not the champagne and orange juice cocktail or the mimosa tree common through the American South. Neither of those. I'm talking about the mimosa, the tropical creeping herb. Mimosa plants are much easier to study in laboratory conditions than large trees. And what's fascinating is that Dr. Gagliano's stimulus response tests of interacting with the plants using water, the mimosas would remember and apply their lessons weeks later, even without further tests. So something interesting is going on with trees and memory, even if we don't fully understand it yet. Fascinatingly, these claims are not newfangled ideas. Less than 2 years before Darwin's death in 1882, he published a book on the power of movement in plants, in which he concluded along the same lines as Wohlleben that, quote, "It is hardly an exaggeration to say that the tip of the radical root acts like the brain of one of the lower animals," receiving impressions from the sense organs and directing several movements. From this perspective, taking seriously Darwin's theory of the descent of man, it is not surprising that all of life is on a spectrum of thinking and feeling, because all of life can be traced back to a common ancestor on the tree of life. As the quote says on the front of your order of service, you and the tree in your backyard come from a common ancestor. 1.5 billion years ago, the two of you parted ways. But even now, after an immense journey in separate directions, that tree and you and us still share 1/4 of our genes. And scientists are at work mapping various tree genomes akin to the Human Genome Project. And since we are all part of one large tree of life, it is more natural than odd for life in the plant kingdom to have evolved aspects of life like versions of memory and taste and smell that are also present in the animal kingdom. And I hope you, like me, have been inspired to learn more. I encourage you to look around where you live. These are Volhaven's words. What dramas are being played out in the wooded areas around you that you can explore? How are commerce and survival balanced in the forests and woodlands that you know? Slow down like that forest bathing. Breathe deep. Look around. What can you hear? What do you see? How do you feel when you're in a forest? Along those lines, I recently learned that less than 1/10 of a mile from my house, measuring 77 feet high and 11 feet in trunk circumference, is the largest sugarberry tree in the state of Maryland. It's nestled in 3rd Street Park between Pistaro's Pizza Restaurant and St. John's Cemetery, which is where Roger Taney is buried, by the way, that infamous judge of the Supreme Court decision, the Dred Scott decision. That's not so great. I like the sugarberry better. And Pistaro's is a great restaurant, by the way. So go have a slice at Pistaro's and check out the sugarberry sometime when you're in downtown Frederick. But the point is that I passed this tree so many times without realizing how remarkable and worth knowing about it is. Another tree nearby to me worth noticing is the English elm at Frederick High School, and another 5-minute walk from my house in somebody's backyard is the oldest and largest ginkgo tree in the United States. It's near the heart of downtown Frederick on West 2nd Street near Market Street. I suspect there are some similarly amazing trees near you. To learn more, Google the Maryland Big Tree Program website, and you can find out more. And although these big solo trees are impressive, one of the most important takeaways from the hidden life of trees is that these isolated trees are nothing compared to the magic, the majesty that happens in and among trees of old-growth forests, which desperately need our protection and support. In the words of the environmental prophet Wendell Berry, invest in the millennium, plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest, that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into mold. Call that prophet and prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. He ends his poem, The Mad Farmer Liberation Front, with these words: practice resurrection. Planting and protecting old-growth forests is one vision of what a genuine resurrection for this planet could actually look like. May we come to live ever more fully from a felt sense of connection with the vibrant, interdependent world of nature of which we are a part. May we not destroy, but protect and enliven the beautiful, diverse forms of life on this planet, which is our only home. Amen, and blessed be.